YouTube vinyl community, Temptations fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about the Temptations' 1971 album, Sky's the Limit, released on Motown Gordy Records at that time. This was the last full-length album with both Eddie and Paul on the band. They left right as this thing was being finished up. Eddie because he wasn't getting along with the other guys, and Paul because of his health reasons, which is really sad. But this is easily, I think, one of their best albums. It's mostly ballads. And at this point, you know, they released several albums in the psychedelic soul tradition that had gained them a lot of popularity and had some big songs with, you know, Ball of Confusion, Cloud 9, Psychedelic Shack. I mean, the list goes on. You know, Can't Get Next to You. They had some fantastic upbeat tracks with Dennis really taking over most of the leads. Well, I say that. They were all sharing lead vocals, but Dennis's powerhouse voice was kind of front and center on a lot of them. But on this album in particular, this kind of plays out like an Eddie Kendrick solo album. I mean, there's like mostly Eddie as the lead vocal on here. So they reverted back to the old school soul style records that they were making in the mid 60s. And that's basically a response to the song Unite the World. They put out as a single in late 1970, and it was the first Temptation single to completely miss the top 30 since like 1964. And so the producers were like, we gotta do something quick. And so they ended up going back into their files from a song they had written a couple of years ago in 1969 called Just My Imagination, and said, all right, well, this is a ballad, this is a love song, let's give it to the guys and see what happens. It went to #1. It was a humongous smash, and it's easily one of their most recognized tracks ever. It's definitely one of their biggest songs, and it's on this album. And the rest of the album kind of follows suit in that style, where it's mostly nice ballads, you know, old school style Temptations music, where it's like a lead singer and then background vocals. Except for a couple of tracks where they do have that psychedelic soul influence at the end, the last two songs. Most of this album is lead singer and background vocals, and it works really, really well. And Eddie takes on most of the leads. Dennis does do a couple. But overall, it's a beautiful album. I think it's easily one of their finest works. Gonna Keep On Trying Till I Win Your Love is the opening track on here. I love how they sing along to the chorus with that descending melody line against the music. I think it's very fun to listen to. Eddie just nails the main vocal, man. His voice was just fantastic. Like, you can't beat that guy's voice. But the chorus on this thing is straight 1967, 68 Temptations. It's that classic feel. So for all the fans that didn't like the psychedelic soul stuff, which apparently there were, which is news to me because I love that stuff, but apparently there were fans that were like, we want the old school stuff. They must have been stoked when they heard this song and this album in particular. But yeah, the string arrangement on here, the tambourine, the bass guitar on this track, the whole thing just sounds like classic Temptations, and I love it. It's really got a good vibe to it. Because you gotta remember, at this point, the band was basically still the original band, except, you know, David left in 68, or was fired in 68, and then Dennis came in. So beyond that, everybody else on here is an original member, which is pretty awesome. So it's still kind of the original Temptations at this point. Before literally right after this album came out and two more left, you know, Paul and Eddie left. And then the second track, Just My Imagination, what more can be said? It was a #1 smash, January 1971 single. The production on this thing is fantastic. The harmonies are so expertly sung. It creates that dreamy vibe of daydreaming or being lost in a dream, lost in your own imagination. They capture that. The harps, the strings, the timpani, the tension, the anxiety, the love, the relaxation. This song goes through so many shifts and creates so many emotions, and you feel exactly what they're singing about the whole time. You can't deny that this thing tugs at your heart just as much as it tugs at their heart as they sing it. Fantastic song, and it's easily, Paul steals the spotlight with his "Every Night on My Knees I Pray" line, which is really one of the only times in this album you actually hear him. I'm not sure how much else he is on this thing, to be honest with you. You don't really hear him too much, but he was in and out of the hospital at this point, so he might not be on this album too much. But beautiful track, you know, it definitely is worthy of that #1 status. Just a hell of a song, and it's easily one of their trademark tunes. On the Exception to the Rule is track 3 on this thing, and I can't tell who does the intro on this one because their voices are really similar here. Like, it sounds like Otis did a lot of the intro kind of stuff. I think it might be him, or it might be Dennis. Because Dennis does sing this thing, and it's cool to hear him sing in more of not a relaxed way, but his voice was so powerful and so strong. and to hear him kind of like restrain it back a little bit, it's kind of interesting. And there's moments on, oh man, I can't think what album it is now. There's moments on Cloud 9, which was one of the first full lengths he did with the guys, where some of the songs had like the older Temptations vibe, and in those moments he was singing basically a little bit more David Ruffin-esque. Not completely, he was still doing his own thing, but to hear him kind of scale it back and not just let it rip, it's kind of fun. You know, then Eddie comes in a couple of times, and then Dennis kind of picks it up at the end to let her up a little bit more. It's a short track, but I love it. The ad-libs from everybody I think are great. The guitar picking is kind of pretty, and the timpani is back again. Very interesting track musically. It doesn't have this big explosive moment or anything, but it builds up and down, which I think is cool, and lets the vocals play on top of that really well. Then you get Smiling Faces Sometimes, which was a big hit for The Undisputed Truth, but not for the Temptations. It was meant to be the third single from this album, or just in general at that point. And then by the time it was decided to be a single, Eddie had left already, and he's on this track pretty prominently, so it would have been a conflict of interest, as they said, to put this thing out. But, you know, it's 12 minutes long, and it just grooves the whole way through. You know, The Undisputed Truth, I think their version hit the top 5 or something when it came out as a single. It was a really big song. But the guitar riff is menacing. The strings conjure up an uneasy feeling throughout the whole track. The crazy effects on the vocals at the end, especially the laughing, the way they do weird echo stuff, I think is great. Excuse me, that was... I can't edit the stuff out. I'm on my phone right now. Everything builds up to this big paranoid feeling, which I think is obviously what the song is about, but the way they evoke that over a 12-minute track, I think speaks a lot to the length of the song. I think as you can't necessarily get away with something like that in a quick couple of minute track. You can, I think you get the point across, but when you really nail it home by like saying like, all right, this is the feeling I'm going for, this is the feeling we're going to create, sometimes paranoia can, you know, take a while to show up, and so this song kind of evokes that, which I think is quite interesting. Their version's really good. I really think it's a standout on this thing for sure. And definitely one of the more groovier songs on here. Side 2 opens with a track called Man, which is a short little song also. Eddie takes the lead, and it's just about kind of, you know, doing your thing. You know, the world was invented by people. I mean, it's not my favorite song on here. There's nothing much to say about it, really. Throw a Farewell Kiss. This is a great cover. I love Dennis's voice on this thing. It harkens back to that 60s soul prime again for me, just like some of the songs on side 1. Real simple instrumentation, which I think lets the vocals do their thing and really shine, which is good because, you know, at this time, especially in the psychedelic soul era, which they would return to on their next album, Solid Rock, you know, this whole era of them, a lot of times was like long songs with them kind of poking up here and there with vocals. They weren't like the main attraction, so to hear the instrumentation be a little more on the quiet side and hear them pop up doing their voices, I think is fantastic. Excellent track to show off their skills. Unite the World was the single from the end of 1970. I like this song a lot. Obviously, it's got a great message about unity and just people getting together and trying to save the planet and be, you know, peace and love and all that stuff. It's great. How the hell was this not a big smash single? It just blows my mind. It's a fun, interesting song. You know, it was just a rare miss that they completely didn't, you know, get this thing on the radio too much. They did perform it on a couple TV shows. It could have been that Eddie was out of the band or just didn't want to promote it, or who knows what the story was. Because they worked together to do Just My Imagination on the Ed Sullivan Show, I think in January of '71. So pretty quick turnaround. So they realized this single didn't do well. They got right back to the studio and did Just My Imagination, and all of a sudden here's a #1 hit. So it may have just been overshadowed and forgotten about, and it's kind of like, all right, well, that wasn't a big song for us. Let's forget it ever existed. It may have been something like that. But crazy fun horn section, great instrumentation. On an album full of ballads, this song sticks out like a sore thumb, but in a fun way. I think it's a great song. Then Love Can Be Anything, Can't Nothing Be Love But Love. Fantastic right at the end of the album. I think it sticks in the tradition of Unite the World. It's got that big psychedelic soul kind of esque mentality. Not as deep or as heavy as what they were doing with Cloud 9 or Psychedelic Shack or any of that stuff, but it's there. So you get more of the vocal trading, which is definitely not a big thing on this album, but it's nice to hear it on here. Melvin gets a few moments to shine, which I think is really cool. I love his voice, which I think is a cool way to end the album, but there's a back cover. which is exactly the same as the front, just without the guys on it. And you got Barrett Strong and Norman Whitfield down there. And here's the inside sleeve. I put it in there was no original inner sleeve, so I put it in one of these nice MoFi sleeves. So MoFi, if you're watching, I like the sleeves. But yeah, on the old Gordy label. Very cool. And I'll put that back in later. Yeah, this is a great album. It's one of my favorite Temptations albums, and it's also bittersweet because it's the last time Eddie and Paul were on an album with them. At that time, they came back later in the early '80s, you know, for one album. I can't remember what it was called. It was called Reunion, Temptations Reunion, something like that. They came back to Motown, and everyone got together for one giant album with everybody on it. But as far as the original group, the original lineup, in the original days, this was the last one. With them on it, so it's definitely bittersweet, and I can't really tell how much Paul is on either, because his voice was always really prominent. You can pick him out from the rest of the guys, just as much as any of them, really, but I'd love to know how much he was on this thing in particular. I know he was going through so much health problems at that point, but yeah, I'd easily give this thing a 7 or 8 out of 10. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. Definitely worth a listen. If you've never heard it before, give it a shot. If you've never heard this, you know, if you're a fan of the Temptations and haven't delved too much into their post-60s work, you know, for something from the 70s, this is easily one of their best albums. And, you know, they were still at the top of their game at this point. Still had something to prove, still had something to show off, and just, you know, show the world they were one of the best groups of all time. So that's it. 8 out of 10. My name is Giggens. This has been The Temptations. Sky's the limit. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.